want to start with a story this morning. I guess as I get older, first of all, let me maybe just give a little bit of context. As I get older, it's more and more difficult to have patience with the younger generation. No offense, younger generation, but as I get older, I heard my daughter, she's 21, Haley, and she said something about the young kids on campus now. It's like, what? She says, yeah, they're Josiah's age. I'm like, you're a couple years apart. And then I realize as I get older, that's part of aging, where you realize you're not the same, you're not young anymore. And you also remember, and sometimes we forget, but you should remember what it's like to learn when you're younger. Now, in this day and age, we have Google. Google helps a lot. You want to learn something, you pull out your phone and, hey, Google, or hey, Siri, whatever. Now, when I was younger, this sounds really weird, when I was younger. And this, some of you that have stories about, I understand those stories that I used to hear from my, the older generation in my day. We used to walk both directions in the storm, and for hours in the snow with bare feet. Now, I remember learning how to drive, learning about cars. And I was a car guy. I didn't go to any classes in high school or anything, no shop classes. I just learned on my own. But a lot of times we learn the hard way. And I remember when I first got, my car, I was driving my parents' car, but cars felt like tanks, And even today, I find myself, if there's a coffee cup upside down on the road, even if it's in the other lane, if there's no cars around, I'll try and hit it, right? Just something I like to do. You pop coffee cups and you run things over. I don't know. But I saw this Home Depot bucket in the middle of the road. I remember this vividly. I was in Hamilton visiting someone. Someone left one of these big Home Depot buckets in the middle of the road, big white plastic bucket. And, hey, let's run over the Home Depot bucket. Let's see what happens. And so I decided, everyone else is swerving around it, and I decided, I'm driving a car. I'm going to crush this thing and, just get rid of it and everyone can drive over it. And I hit that bucket and I just remember hearing for about half a kilometer as it was dragging under my car. So I didn't break it. It didn't pop off the side. So I pulled into a parking lot and it's kind of wedged in and I pulled it out. Good plastic back then. It didn't break. And then thankfully my car didn't break down. But as I got to learn about cars more and more, I realized that could have done so much damage to my vehicle. It could have done a lot of damage where, I could have been stuck at the side of the road. It could have broke, the radiator or something like that. Anything could have got damaged because the car wasn't built to do that. And while it seems strong on the outside, car has brittle parts. Another quick story is when I had one of my Camaros when I was young, and they don't have bumpers. It's plastic. And I remember it was a parking lot, it was November, it was cold, and I was trying to show off to my friends, and there was a shopping cart in the parking lot. We were out there having fun, and I thought I'd just ram it out of the way. So I did with the Camaro with paint on the bumpers. And I just remember the paint all cracked, and there was spider cracks. The first time I learned about, you can crack the paint in the winter. Without a bumper, these things can happen. Now, some of you are like, Jamie, you were a dumb kid. Who would do that, right? Well, back then, that's a part of learning. And I'm sure each of you did pretty foolish things when you were younger as well. So for as many fingers are pointing, you can think of your own experiences and, share those in your discipleship groups. I just say that to say, sometimes we have to learn the hard way. And this next story in Scripture, it is a small story. As a matter of fact, it's only a few verses. It's only 4 verses. Yet, it's told by both Matthew, Luke, and also Mark. All 3 tell this story. Now, Mark gives it 6 verses, and Luke gives it 3, Matthew gives it 4. And this is just a small story, but there's a lot of information, and it really teaches us about learning and teaching. Learning and teaching, after all, that's what our lives are about. Learning and teaching to make disciples and to follow Jesus as a disciple. A disciple, by the way, disciple in the Bible is used more than the word Christian. And Jesus referred to his followers as disciples. We talk about Christians, but get used to the word disciples because that's what they were and we are. And here's just a basic definition of disciple. This is found in the Rose Guide to Discipleship. And they say a disciple is a person who follows Jesus and someone who wants to know Jesus and his teaching, to grow to be more like Jesus, and then to go for Jesus, making new disciples by serving others. So, as a disciple, that's what we're about. In short, disciples are about learning, following, and growing, and teaching. All right, so learning and teaching. Now, this next story, as short as it is, it's a story that I'm going to give a little bit of a context. It's a story about something that happened on the Sea of Galilee. Now, that's kind of a bad word, sea, a poor word, not bad, a poor word. It should be more Lake of Galilee, and at times it's referred to as lake. And sometimes you'll read it as sea. Mark in particular will see that. It's found here. So we're going to zoom in. So here's Africa and Egypt, and then right over here in Israel. And we're going to zoom in, and you'll see here's the Mediterranean Sea. Right up here is the Sea of Galilee. That's where Jesus spent most of his time teaching. He actually grew up over here in Nazareth, and then he moved to Capernaum, and he lived right on the Sea of Galilee where he gathered all of his disciples. This is where they were from. The first disciples, the 12 disciples from Galilee. And then Jesus spent most of his time right in this area here throughout his life. The Sea of Galilee is pretty small. Some of you have seen this before. Compared to Lake Ontario, there you go. The Sea of Galilee. Like, what? Why is this called the sea and that's called the lake? Right? Well, sometimes we do that. I mean, we call little ponds sometimes lakes and creeks. Don't get caught up in the wording. But it was not, even though it looks small, it's still not that small. Here's the Sea of Galilee. Here's a picture of the Sea of Galilee today. Another picture, people can go out there boating. It is not that small. When you look at it today, you can see it's not that small. And you get a bit of an idea of what it would have been like. Well, you need to know this in order to understand the context of this next story. Because this next story is about a storm that hits the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is in the boat with his disciples. And so, what kind of boat? Well, a number of years ago, as the Sea of Galilee was receding and drying up a bit, the shoreline, there was a couple fishermen out there, and they saw something under the mud. And they pulled up an old boat, and now you can find it in the museum over there. And this is what the structure that remains. And this would have been a fishing boat in the first century. Almost, you get the basic foundation of what the boat would have looked like, an understanding of the size. Most likely, this is the type of fishing boat that Jesus would have been on with the disciples. This is the type of boat that Peter and James and John and Andrew would have been out fishing in. So, a little bit of an idea of what the fishing boat would have looked like. And now, why is the boat important? Why is the size of the sea important? Well, number one, I want you to notice there's no big beacons. You don't have like a little lights on the top so people know that you're coming through. You don't see them, they didn't have PFDs, personal flotation devices, right? Okay, so they don't have the safety features that we have today. They don't have radios where you can radio in or push a button and someone can come to help you. We have that today. So a hiker just got attacked by a bear, was able to push a button, and the rescue came in and pulled him out of there, and he was okay. This was just 2 days ago. I mean, we have safety features today. Remember, back then they did not. Now, this is a story about a storm that comes up on the Sea of Galilee. Some of you may see pictures like this. Well, why did I show you the Sea of Galilee? Because it's probably the waves weren't that big. They were big enough to come into the boat. But that's why I showed you how big the boat was. Because it doesn't take a giant, 6 to 8 to 10 foot wave to swamp the boat. And it doesn't take a giant storm to drive fear into the heart of even seasoned fishermen who would have been on that boat. And even if you're on that boat and a storm comes by and you have great experience without the personal flotation devices and with a great wind where no one can see you and what's happening out there on the sea, on the lake, you could find yourself in great trouble. As a matter of fact, they were so afraid this day, it said they feared for their lives. Okay, so let's go into the story. This story is found in Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 4, and it's also found in Luke. I believe it's Luke 3. Not Luke 3, I got that one wrong. Luke 8. Yeah, Matthew 8, Luke 8, and Mark 4. Okay. So we're looking at Matthew's account. Now, Matthew also tells us, and so does Mark. Mark gives a little more details. There was a crowd there. And Jesus said to his disciples, let's get into the boat, go to the other side. The context is also important. Jesus is tired. He's exhausted from helping the crowds. Jesus is the one that initiated, let's get in this boat and let's go to the other side. And now you have to ask yourself, did Jesus know there was a storm coming? Surely he knew there would have been a storm brewing. I mean, did Jesus not know everything? And we're going to come back to this question in a few minutes. Anyways, they get into the boat and they go across the lake. And as they go in, there was a fierce storm, Matthew records. And it says, Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, shouting, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Here's Mark's account. Mark said, he told them, let's cross over to the other side. So they left the crowd and got in the boat. A great windstorm arose and the waves were breaking over the boat, so the boat was already being swamped. Now, Jesus was sleeping on a cushion. First of all, this is a bit of a confusing story. How would Jesus be able to sleep? I don't know about you. Great windstorm, people shouting. Maybe, I don't know, Bianca's a light sleeper. I seem to sleep through, kids crying and stuff like that. I can sleep through. So, I don't know, Jesus, there's all these guys yelling. They're afraid. They're probably yelling, quick, there's water coming in. Let's get it out. Who knows? But it's mass chaos, probably. They're so afraid, they can't take it anymore. They decide to wake up Jesus, who is sleeping, through water crashing down on his face. Remember, there's no below deck, close the doors. This seems like Jesus is out on the deck. There's a cushion there, and he's able to sleep through this. So this also tells me the crowds were there. Jesus needed to get away. Jesus was exhausted. Fully God, but fully man. He became one of us. He got tired. Jesus got exhausted. He got tired. Maybe so much so that he was just done. And he was out. And so here he is on the boat and he's sleeping. And they woke him up. Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die? What did they expect Jesus to do? I mean, this is early on in Jesus' mission. What did they expect Jesus to do? Jesus hadn't walked on the water yet, so I don't think they were thinking, Lord, help us all to walk on the water and get out of here. All right? Jesus had raised the widow's son, widow of Nain, her son. Jesus had turned the water to wine. That's not going to really help them. And if they die, I mean, they're asking for him not to let them die. So raising them up at this point is not in their mind. Jesus had healed many people. So what did they think he was going to do at this point? See, we like to think that these disciples, they're on this journey with Jesus and they're learning about Jesus. There are so many things that they couldn't put together, just like us today. We have a lot of questions. So, for example, Jesus was able to raise the widow's son, and we learn he rose others from the dead, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, but he couldn't raise John the Baptist, or maybe others. I'm sure others died during Jesus' ministry. Why didn't he raise those people up? Why does he pick and choose who he heals? Certain people were healed, certain people weren't. So, understand that. What about food? I mean, later on, they're going to see Jesus multiplying food. They're going to see that he withers a fig tree. Couldn't he have made figs grow? If he can wither it, can he make it blossom? If he can multiply food for 5,000 people, why are they so hungry they have to pick grains of head from the fields and eat them on the Sabbath day? Why didn't they just say, Lord, multiply the food? He turned water to wine early. One of the first things he did. The first thing we ever recorded. So couldn't he just, hey, I see you guys are hungry, thirsty. Yeah, we're sick of water. Hey, no problem. Here, give me your canteens or, your wineskins. Whatever. There's a lot of questions that they would have had that Jesus didn't directly answer. Jesus could have come and he could have said clearly, here's the story. And he could have done it for everyone. I'm God. This is what is going to be like. I'm going to have to pay the price for you. This is how I'm going to do it. You need to accept me. I'm going to prove that I'm God. He could have done tons of miracles all at once. He could have come as one of the teachers of the law right in front of the temple grounds and done all kinds of stuff. But he comes And he's born to this little village, and he goes with these fishermen. I mean, isn't this confusing? And what about knowing the future? I mean, we know that God knows the future. Let me see if I've got this passage up. Now, yeah, so here's an example. Here is David, and he's on the run from Saul. And David inquires of the Lord. He says, will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, please tell your servant. And the Lord told me, talk to him. And he said, he will come down. And then he said, will the citizens hand me over? They will. See, God already knows what will happen. If you stay here, yeah, this is going to happen. God knows the future. God knows all the outcomes. David could have asked him other things. Lord, if I go to this forest, will Saul find me? Lord, if I go down to the river, will I have food? I mean, the questions we would have for God are unending. So why is it that God knows the future here? But then you have other passages, because we're told Jesus is God. And Jesus says, now concerning that day no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, except the Father alone. Jesus, do you know or not? Because there's a lot of things Jesus did know. Jesus did predict his death. There's a lot of things that he knew was coming. Now, what about being God? See, the Trinity is a big question that we have. If Jesus is God, how does he not know some things? How can he not do all these miracles? Why does he choose to do things differently? And these are questions that they would have had as well, similar questions. And I don't have all the answers this morning, but I will say, for one, when it comes to, for example, God knowing the future, if Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, how do you understand that? Well, there's a lot of questions that you might ask that I could also turn around and say, how is God everywhere at once? How does God have no beginning? How does the Spirit work? There's all kinds of questions that we might have that people can't answer. And I'm glad we can't answer that. Because we're talking about the God of the universe. If you knew everything about the God of the universe, you'd have to be equal to God. And I'm glad that we don't know everything. You can't comprehend the God of the universe. We can't even comprehend the universe. How far it goes and what's out there. There's so much we don't know. And yet, we expect that if we don't understand what God's like, that this must not be real? So does God know the future? No. Well, if God's going to become one of us, when he's a baby, babies don't talk. Was he fully human? Yes. Was he fully God? Yes. How much would he have known as a baby? Well, during those years, he didn't talk. He would have been just like a baby. He would have given up all knowing, all knowledge. And so as he gets older, and as he's revealing some things he knows, and some things are hidden. But as he goes to sit at the right hand of the Father, I'm sure that all these things are again, he knows them all again. So I don't have all the answers. I'm not trying to give them. But I'm just suggesting that we shouldn't think we have to know everything about God. God is greater than we are. God will reveal himself sometimes mysteriously, just like he did the apostles. But you need to trust that God has a reason for that. And so, Isaiah says it best. When we read in there, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways, declares the Lord. For as heaven is higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts greater than your thoughts. You have to understand this is the God of creation, the God of the universe. And there is much more going on in creation and in the universe and outside of the universe than we can understand. He hints at that when he talks about the spiritual forces of evil. He hints at that when he talks about angels and demons. And when Jesus talks about heaven and coming from the Father. There is so much more we don't know about. We need to trust him. Just like the disciples were called to trust him. As they got in the boat with him and crossed over to the other side of the lake, they put their trust in Jesus. And while they didn't have all the answers, what did they do? They turned to the right direction when they needed help. Lord, save us. Jesus didn't say, I can't help you. Jesus said, you have little faith. And then he spoke. He rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. I like how Mark puts it. He rebuked the wind and he said to the sea, be still. And it was calm. Be quiet. The wind ceased and there was a great calm. Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Why are you afraid, Jesus? You might as well be saying, Jesus might as well have said, have I not shown you? The 12 were with them when he turned the water into wine, when he raised the dead, when he went out and healed multitudes. The disciples were with him. They should know to trust him, even though they don't understand the how. They understand that they are in good hands when they have their faith in Jesus. They were terrified and asked, who is this? Even the winds and the waves, even the winds and the seas obey him. They didn't fully understand. So why did Jesus not say, let me just explain it all to you? There is a reason Jesus did it in this way, and there's a reason why they learned so much through this little encounter. This was also a life lesson for them. So the question is, do we trust him? God tells us, call on me in the day of trouble and I will rescue you, and you will honor me. And James says, are any of you suffering? Are any of you in trouble? You should pray. Are any of you happy? Sing praises. When you're in trouble, when we need God, turn to God and talk to him. But that does not mean the answer will be, oh, I'll get you out of trouble. If every Christian had no trouble, everyone would be Christian. Well, and for wrong reasons. They would come to Jesus as they did in the past. Jesus said, you're here just because you want free food. People would come with the wrong heart, and they would think that everything's okay. Jesus wants our hearts. Our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so people have come up with some sayings to get people to understand this. First of all, there will be suffering for Christians. You will have trials. You will have storms in your life. And you need to learn how to deal with those storms by not losing your faith. You see, the wrong thing for them to do would be to jump off that boat and leave Jesus and say, this guy can't help us, I'm out of here. You need to stay with Jesus and turn to him. And if you don't understand, it's okay, talk to him. Lord, I don't understand what's going on here. Let your will be done, though, and you know what's best, and trust him. There's a saying someone came up with, sometimes God calms the storm, but sometimes he lets the storm rage and he calms his child. Sometimes God lets those storms rage because sometimes there's purpose for those storms. Did Jesus know that storm was coming? I think so. And we know when he walked on the water, he knew that the storm was coming. As a matter of fact, I think he probably even made the storm come. You see, Jesus taught sometimes the greatest teachings. We all learn differently. Some of us are visual learners. Some are audio learners. Some are, learn using our hands. And we all learn differently. Jesus didn't just lecture and teach people, and that was his only form of teaching. Teaching was life on life, walking with them, explaining things, but letting things happen, and then watching how Jesus handled them. They learned from the challenges. Someone else once said, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Some of you might have heard that saying, right? I mean, sometimes it's through the challenges in life that we grow abilities and gifts, that we're able to help others, and that we're able to understand that God is shaping our character. And finally, you have to trust him and accept it. Let your will be done, God. I'm going to accept this. Another person once said, you can't control the winds, but you can adjust your sails. Except, Lord, if this is your will, okay, help me to know how to go with this. Help me to deal with it and help me to appreciate it. Find the good in every situation. When you're praying for sunshine and it's raining, maybe you can be happy because, that farmer was praying for rain that day. Maybe you're going to have food next week because the rains are there. Growing sometimes it's painful. Losing weight, you're hungry, it's not comfortable. Exercising, you're sore, it's not comfortable. Saving financially for your future, you're giving up some comforts, it's not as comfortable. But you know what? In the long run, you see where it's going. And so with our faith, it's not always going to be comfortable, but I will assure you this, there is a great storm coming. We will all face death. And when I wake up in the morning and when I, see those extra gray hairs, the wrinkles and that's a reminder like that red sky in the morning for sailors. Or like the winds starting to pick up. It's a reminder the end of the road is coming. And the only one who can bring me safely to the other side is my Lord Jesus. He's the only one who knows what's on the other side. The only one to have died and to have raised from the dead, never to die again. Do we trust him? Today, talking about discipleship in our series, today people are asking all kinds of questions. You know, when you look at influencers and the things people are looking to have, the questions people are looking to have answered the most. Fashion and beauty, health and fitness, food, personal development, lifestyle change, finances and investing, do-it-yourself in your homes. And you look at all the things and then you think about what the greatest influencers are teaching, how they're presenting themselves. You know, if Jesus were there on screen and he is the greatest influencer, but how would he look? If he said, let me tell you how to take care of yourself and help you with your aging, with your beauty. You know, the scriptures say there was nothing attractive about his appearance. If he said, let me tell you how to be successful with your money. You know, he came and he was born in a cave and he worked hard all his life and then he died with nothing and died again on a cross. If he came and he said, let me tell you how to eat well and how to live healthy. And you see his sleep pattern's all messed up and he's getting up early in the morning and he's going hungry. That's against all the things we hear of all the influencers telling us how to have a great life. I don't know what to do with all that. I mean, I'm trying to follow this, and of course we recognize this is a different day that Jesus is living. But when you try and apply it today, that's our challenge. How do you take Jesus' teaching on being willing to give our lives, being willing to give our money, having no place to sleep as he did for 3 days. Now again, he didn't have family. He started his mission. He did live with his family for a number of years before he started on his missionary journey, or on his mission toward the cross for 3 years. But again, we're trying to look at Jesus. By the world's standards, no one would listen to this guy. By the world's standards, and that is difficult because we are trying to point people to Jesus, and he's telling things that the world is saying, yeah, this is what you need to do, and Jesus is telling us something or showing us a different way of going out, putting all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, all of our gifts, all of our abilities, all of our belongings, you pour it into the life with God. And that's just difficult for us to understand and difficult for us to live out. But do we trust him? Because when the storm's raging and when there's no one else to turn to, do we have Jesus in the boat with us? Have we followed him? Have we pointed to others so that they too can come onto the boat, so that they too will have Jesus on their boat? Because tough times will come for everyone. We must all face death. And we have to trust that he knows best. For he's the only one that knows all things. The spiritual side, why he lets the storms rage, what's going on. So we pray, let your will be done, not ours. So as we go and try and make disciples this morning, it's going to be challenging. We are still learning ourselves. You don't have to know everything. But try and remember the life of Jesus and emulate it. Follow in his footsteps. Live out the life Jesus lived. And a city on a hill cannot be hidden. A light in a dark room it will be seen by all people, will not be hidden. And that's what he's called us to be, lights to the world. So may God help us in our journey, and may we never leave our faith, our friend, our comforter. May we always invite him into our boat in our journey of life. Let's stand for our final hymn.